Welcome y bienvenidos to another episode of Love Learning You. I'm your hostess, Justine Gonzalez, and I'm excited to introduce and get into it with our featured voices guest today, Horacio Sanchez or Horatio Sanchez. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, before we get started, I want to go ahead and share a quick slide that I made so that our viewers, if you're viewing, now if you're just listening, make sure you go on over to YouTube, Spotify, where you can watch this. But here's a quick slide just so you all have some background information on Dr. Sanchez, Neuroscience, Implicit Bias. He's also a best-selling author, but these are just some of his contributions. I think even your book on the far right, that came out in like '08. Yeah, when I was just researching. I was gonna say you probably don't even know. It all runs
I
together.
don't remember.
But before we hop into our cultural connector questions today, a little bit of info on him. Your newest book just came out. I'm so grateful to you that you shared some information with me. And before we get into it, I want to let viewers know I'm not going to read what's on the slide. So if you all got a chance to see or pause it, great. But I always start my podcast by giving our guests their flowers. I was telling Horatio that before we got started, he's one of my first guests that I do not know him personally. So listeners all over the world, I'm going out of my comfort zone too today. Maybe you all are too, just to be here even listening. So thank you, subscribers and followers. But this is our guest, and to give you your flowers, sir, my mother passed away 3 years ago. I delivered her eulogy, and it has been really, really difficult the past 3 years. So, the first stab I took at presenting again solo was Innovative Schools Conference in Orlando, and you presented right before I did. So, the topics you spoke on, I went into it through a lens of recovering from grief. Is your gratitude greater than your grief? I just wanted to tell you that so you know. I learned a lot from your session. I laughed a lot because you're hilarious, but you're not just a brainy researcher. You're also really funny and engaging too. And then, even after you were so gracious to share your text with me, I also found, and it warmed my heart, you had dedicated the book to your wife. And you said because she inspires you. So, I'm a romantic. Me and my hubby are romantic. So I was like, oh. And I was just so like, oh my goodness, he emailed me back because I know I lose emails and stuff all the time. So I wanted to give you your flowers. You all go back and click back if you want to read his bio. You can find him all over the World Wide Web. But welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself now, sir? I wanted to make sure that you knew why your presentation meant so much to me.
I appreciate hearing that. I'm Horacio Sanchez. I don't take myself that seriously. I really don't. I try to. My biggest goal in life is to help people, and if I can do anything to do that, it's good. And when I talk to people, all I look for is value added. I would like your contributions to me to add something to me, and my time with you to add something to you, and then it's all good.
Likewise. Okay, let's get into it. So, cultural connectors, if you're new here, we always start with kind of like speed dating. Well, culture is all about our norms, our beliefs, our values, our language, and not just hablo en español y también en inglés. It's our love languages, how we express empathy and sympathy, all these things we're going to get in today. And I've got some questions for you, sir. I've got some big questions. I want to know the neuroscience, what's going on in the world. Um, so, so cultural connectors, let's travel in time first. Take us back to little Horacio's dining table. Take us back in time. You're in third grade.
Okay.
What are we eating with you? You have us over. Let's all travel back in time. What are we going to have for dinner? And what is your household like?
Okay. If I think about meals, you probably grew up like me, where the dinner table is a big thing in our culture.
Hmm.
And what we eat is we tend to spend too much time at the dinner table, I think. My family used to have big Sunday dinners was a big deal, not only for our family, but for our extended family. And that doesn't mean people that were family to us, just neighbors, people who went to church with us. Our house was filled every single Sunday. And I remember that because it was just expected. And one of the mainstays in that was rice and beans, actually. But
Arroz con frijoles,
no,
habichuelas. Oh,
and the way my mom used to make it is you take the coconut and grate it and
mm.
take the steeping water and pour it over and get that to be your substance of your water with just a hint of coconut flavor. And it was always a mainstay. Rice and beans were there all the time. And so little me will remember rice and beans.
Okay. So little me remembers rice and beans once a week. I don't usually share parts like as much about me. I have to say something for this first question though. So that was our meals once a week. But for me, and so you know a little bit about my cultural context and why I nerd out, and my PhD ABD is cultural neuroscience, cultural psychology, and studying that with school leaders. You've studied extensively leader and school bias, implicit bias, etc., for viewers to know, even if you're not in education. Um, but I grew up, my friends and family lovingly call me an Amo-Rican. My mother's bloodlines are Amish Mennonite. My grandparents left the Amish church, and my father
Wow.
Puerto Rican. So she learned how to make everything, and we ate rice and beans like once a week growing up, and also some white rice with ketchup on it.
I got nothing to
So,
say about
oh,
that.
don't. But I had to insert that. But my grandparents on my dad's side had a restaurant in
Uh-huh.
Elkhart, Indiana. So that was also, we were used to being around family, or oh, that's Pablo's daughter. So that kind of vibe that you described is very familiar, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners will relate to that. Okay, song that you walk on stage to. I don't remember what song you came out to when I saw you speak a couple months ago, but what is kind of your anthem song that pumps you up,
Uh,
or you like to come
I
out?
I actually, since I speak so much and I speak on so many topics, I usually pick a song related to the topic.
Ah,
If I were just to pick a song, um, I usually pick something that I think most people would recognize in the first couple beats because of what it does to the brain. So I'll probably come up to something like Billie Jean. However, when I leave the stage, I would leave to something more gangster, something like Kingdom Come.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. We're getting to know a little bit about you. What's on your, okay, well, loaded question for like researchers. This is just one of my bookcases in my house, but what's on your bookshelf right now as far as like a book that you're really into right now?
I always hate this question because um, I don't read a lot of books. I read a lot of research papers. So I
Journals.
try to read three research papers a day,
Okay.
and most of my book reading is for more entertainment. So I just finished David Baldacci's last book, and
Okay.
however, there's a reason for that. I think neuroscience um, is doing so many different kinds of things, and I'm trying to keep a handle on all the different ways it's going. And I think the research papers help me keep right abreast of where it's cutting right now,
Right.
while books in neuroscience tend to bring me to where it was before.
Yeah, like almost a reflection on this is what we know.
Right,
And then it's like, okay, well, we got to start making this is the steps forward. Let's make a new blueprint.
right.
Let's reimagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think if you look at some of the stuff I've written, oftentimes my writings bring it right to the edge because some of
Yep.
my old stuff was people's new stuff later on,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I want to be there
I
rather
can.
than in the back end.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Another just fun question before we go a little deeper. If you could be any animal or plant for a day, which would you choose and why?
Animal or plant, you know,
Just for a day.
um,
Just for a
just
day.
for a day. Well. um, I would try to research and find out who's the baddest predator and go with that because I don't want to be eaten. It's pretty
Okay,
like,
okay.
I don't want to
Like
be a
it.
punk, so I'll be a predator.
I like it. We like that. Okay.
But if I,
Um,
however, on the plant side, I would probably go with something like lavender, which is just the opposite because it's
mm.
kind of just relaxes you, and I like that concept too. So cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. I see you're really balancing here. And I know we'll get into more of that with your areas of expertise with neuroscience. One of the things that I've been fascinated with, and it's coming more, I do some different creative ventures on social media, but it's just this also idea of intergenerational communications and shifts. And to
Mhm.
your point about just keeping up with all the directions everything are going, I think the intention, listeners and viewers, I always think of it like if we were all here together, how could we converse about these things? So again, remember to weigh in the comments if you have questions or ideas or things that come into your mind. But one of the things before we go deeper into neuroscience stuff is if there's a key principle that you can trace back to your childhood from family, from parents, guidance, what is that principle and how do you still see it showing up in your life today?
Um, I would say I was raised to live on purpose.
Okay.
And my mother, that was a big thing with my mother. Like you have to be directional. You have to be doing something on purpose. You have to have some intention. And so finding your purpose was a big deal to me.
Okay.
And
Me too.
and there are two because of that, I ended up living by two axioms. And I don't know exactly when they got in, but they've been here for a while. So one of the things I tell people, and anybody who knows me will know these ones. One of the things I've always told people is I was put on this face of the earth to help people, and I really believe that. So I live that way. And the other thing I live by is I have good days and better days, and that's the only two kind of days I can have: good days or better days. And it doesn't make me Pollyanna, and it doesn't make me unaware, but I do know enough about the brain to say that what you decide to focus on and how you decide to see the lens in which we see the world impacts my brain chemistry so much that this is a healthier way to live.
Mm. Perception has a lot to do with where we're standing or sitting at any given point in time, huh?
And since so much of what you are, what you feel is your perceptions of what is external, and since most of what you are is what you perceive,
Yeah.
not what is happening to you, then the world becomes under your control. You're in control of situations because the situation doesn't govern you. You end up governing the situation.
Mm. Well, I know myself included, I'm excited to learn more ways and ideas, even that you have through your lens of research, of how we can continue to learn how to do that better as humans in our
Mhm.
human experience, because that can be really, really tricky, especially sometimes if we're living in times right now where information's so accessible and so is misinformation and disinformation. And that can do a real trick to what you choose to focus on.
Yes.
We're seeing it in our schools, we're seeing it in students, we're seeing it in adults, quite frankly. Us as adults, I think, are acting out the most right now.
Yeah.
What are your just even thoughts about the context of this school year is coming to a close in 2025, pivotal year in history in the world, in my opinion. But what are you seeing as far as our abilities to really pull ourselves up? Because like that, so I'm saying I'm being a little bit of a poking. Like if somebody hears you say that, like, oh, that's easy for him to say. He's been a best-selling author. He goes all over and speaks. People love him. It's easy for him to say he has good days and better days. What would you say? I'm being a little facetious, but from a neuroscience, because I know the work I've put in through the years, even to try to shift
Mhm.
some of my mindset patterns and neural
Right.
pathways. What would you say to somebody who's already going, well, that's easy for you to say?
Well, okay, let's be fair to everyone, including those people. Um, you started someplace. You started
Mm,
this race of life someplace. And one of the things that you have no call in and you have no power over, you were born with a temperament. And
mm,
your temperament actually tells you when you perceive the world, how much the world impacts you chemically. So, to be fair, there are people who are impacted less chemically and people who are overly impacted by the world. If you are on that end of the spectrum and you got to the place where it's easy for me to say that stuff, I understand that because you started there and the world impacted you differently. And the lens you saw as even a baby was
mm.
filtered to that temperament. So I don't begrudge your position. However, your position can still change if you were to actually take on the perception of what I focus on impacts me. Because one of the things I've found is that the people who focus on negative and who are negative surround themselves with negative, and they are unaware that all of that impacts them. So they're basically created a circle in which they can't escape. And so and also, to be fair, to me, I wasn't this way all my life. And
Yeah,
so
same.
I grew up out of hard stuff and I came out of neighborhoods that was the greatest and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, ooh, I came out. I I actually made a decision to
Mm,
shift my perceptions, and it was work. And it did not happen overnight, and it did not happen quickly. But once it happened, it was permanent. So I'm telling everybody there's hope for everybody, and it is a better way to live because wouldn't you rather go through life thinking it is a wonderful experience than go through life thinking this really sucks?
yeah.
Because out of the two, and this really sucks has nothing to do with what's happening to you. This really sucks has to do with how do I respond to the things that are happening? And I think we have an option in response. And I do know it's harder for some people. And I do know it's not easy. And I do know some people go through a lot more than others.
Yeah.
But you're going to play the hand you're dealt. And I'm just hoping you play it to the best of your ability. And that's all I will hope for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Horacio, did you have a pivotal moment you can think of that was like an aha where you said, no more? Um, that shifted and you said,
Yeah.
I can't keep validating myself externally with people who like one simple question, viewers, listeners, look at who you talk to most on any given week or month. Those are the people who are validating your experiences and look at
Right.
their lives. Do you want, is that what you're aiming for? Right. So you're going to keep energetically attracting that same thing. And I think to your point, sometimes we just don't
Right.
know it. We go, well, they love me. They're saying, yeah, I'm right about this. But well, maybe that person thinks the same way you do and they live as negatively. Did you have some of like a aha moment?
Yeah, I think I had a aha period. I was kind of living two lives in many ways. I was going to a very rigorous academic level high school, and I was hanging out with very non-academic and very different friends.
Yeah.
And but I grew up with these people, and
Yeah.
they're the people who I live around.
Yeah.
But it was almost a case where the two worlds were clashing,
Yep.
and and the and their opinion of me was that I had to make a decision, which was weird to me because the decision, all that was happening was I was forcing myself to learn, and so
Hey, you
I didn't think that was necessarily a sin, and I didn't tell them their lack of wanting to learn was a big issue,
yeah.
and the fact that we were all so connected made it really hard. And then by the time I went to college, when I came back home, I got I people were still my friends, but they almost like treated me like I was a narc.
I
Like,
understand.
you
You've
can't say this
changed.
around him anymore. He's, and it just I found that it really was a situation in which I had to overcome the thing, because most people at that moment go either or. And my way was, there has to be a way to bridge this.
Yeah.
And the way to bridge this is continue trying. And
Yeah.
that's all I could do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful thing too, right? Right now at this moment, I think any person can relate to having to choose whether it is based on a belief a family member holds or a difference. That shift in relationship changes when one of the two people, even if we just zoom in on a friendship, when one of the two people doesn't stay put in that same city or that same school, and they go out and they have very different lived experiences because
Mhm.
you can't not be changed, especially by traveling and things like that. So I think that's another example where I've seen, especially people after you finish college or after you
Right.
graduate high school, because it's kind of like, well, do I want to stay? And do I stay with the people I've always been around? But that's scary. It can, and that I think also has capacity levels for humans of comfort. You know,
Mhm.
that's the most terrifying thing in the world. To me, the most terrifying thing in the world would have been purchasing a home at 21 and then being like, I'm gonna live here until the day I die. That. But to other people, they're like, it's crazy. You don't want that.
Right.
Well, that's
Right.
okay. We still have many things in common we can talk about. We just don't live our lives the same way in that way. And I think this is where empathy comes in. A big topic I want to ask you some brain neuroscience things about and how it plays into it. And I think empathy comes from a Greek root and bathos or Latin, to really become impassioned or get passionate about someone else. A lot of times, I think, especially in education, we've said, put yourself in someone else's shoes. And empathy actually takes a lot deeper effort than that. I think we sometimes lie to ourselves and go, well, I read one of his books, so yes, I can develop empathy now for this group of people, or I can develop empathy for learners who have this disability or they're differently abled. But the reality is, how can we really go to the deepest depths to develop empathy towards someone if we haven't gotten to know them at those depths and understand what drives them, their norms, their beliefs, their values from a cultural lens? So sorry, that's a little soapbox of mine because I think one of the things I've seen more and more writers writing about it is like an empathy crisis, partly
Right.
from technology and stuff. Where are you at, just from your lens, where you sit in the world as far as empathy in general, or what comes to mind for you? Those are some of like my hot button things that come up of sometimes I think we just don't even fully understand what empathy is or have common definition as humans.
When I talk about empathy, I only talk about it in the lens of neuroscience. And
Perfect.
and the reason I do that is because if you understand it from the lens of neuroscience, then I think a lot of the misunderstood conflict goes away. Um, it's sad to me right now that some people actually put empathy in the list of bad words. I can't even
Right.
fathom that right now.
Yeah.
What empathy is for the human brain is this: the human brain should automatically, if you're healthy and developed appropriately, should automatically monitor emotional expressions done by the face, hands, posture, gestures, and tone of voice.
Mm,
Those things trigger your brain to trigger a thing called mirror neurons. So if someone gave an angry face towards you,
mm,
it will trigger your mirror neurons to trigger your motor neurons to mimic that expression. All this is happening in your head in 200 milliseconds or less. So you're not even aware it happens.
mm,
It's completely subconscious. However, every emotional expression carries with itself a chemical signature. So when you make a pissed off face, usually you're pissed off. Well, the other person is now a little about that chemistry just from looking at you, which will probably influence their response towards you. So
Mm.
empathy isn't always necessarily, ooh, I I I feel for you. Empathy is oftentimes I feel with you. But what I feel with you is not always great. It's not always things. Sometimes I feel with you, I feel your sadness. I feel your joy. I sometimes I am receiving your anger. And so empathy basically is a process in which the brain is supposed to help us understand social dynamics that are more significant, but also be aware of social emotional movements that can sometimes be good or dangerous. So
Right.
that's why we are wired to do it, because we're supposed to notice someone who seems dangerous or someone who seems angry to actually prepare ourselves for the all the options. But in that, we also get a lot of other things. So we monitor subconsciously face, hands, postures, gestures, and tone of voice, and that influences our thoughts and actions. But most of the time, we're not aware that it happened unless it's just conscious. So everybody's aware of this person looked pissed off at you, and you got pissed off at them. That's easy, you know that.
Right.
But the real issue is that it's happening all the time and you're not aware of it. So your microsarcades, that'll be the largest scanning feature of your eyes, are constantly moving.
Okay.
They automatically spot emotions of other people. So you're walking down the street and you pass six people, you paid them no mind. If they were displaying emotions, your brain spotted them, your brain mirrored it, and you were influenced. So it has gotten me to the place where I understand the emotional experience of the people around me, whether I know them or not, impacts me on a daily basis constantly. And if you understand that, then you can quickly make a quick assumption, which is the levels of the emotions that surround me
Mm-hmm.
are either helping me or hurting me. So you can, from that, you can pretty much get school environment. Go to a school where everybody seems happier, and guess what? You're better off. Go to a school where everybody looks pissed off or tired, and you're worse off because they're pissed off and tired is changing your chemistry. Their
Yes.
happiness is
Yes.
changing their chemistry. So people walk around saying, I'm not being impacted by other people, are unaware of how the brain actually works.
Yeah.
And the other problem with this whole thing about empathy is that I think people have lumped empathy into the equity and diversity conversation. And empathy is part of our humanity. It's part of what we're hardwired to do. It has nothing necessarily to do with equity or race. It has to do with how we respond. Um,
Ah.
and so the reason it's been tied in is because we tied into bias. So yes, what the same things that produce empathy in us biases us towards people, but
Ah.
that is a component of bias. It's not all of bias. So for example, you have a negative bias. Your negative bias has nothing to do with anything else in relation to people necessarily. So we know about negative bias, and we know you're born with it because we looked at babies' brains, and babies, when mom's happy, guess what happens to babies' brains? They mirror motor neurons, and baby gets happier.
Yeah.
When mom's sad, motor neurons mirror neurons, motor neurons, baby gets sad. However, the impact of sad on baby was 5 times more than happy. So,
Ooh.
so we have this negative bias. So
Mm.
there are lots of aspects of bias and that we have that we deal with, and they all have to be put together to give us outcome. And what happens if we reduce bias to just one aspect of bias
Right.
or one topic related to bias, we lose. And what we want to do is understand all the way the brain produces bias and see how they impact on each other. Then we end up with what is an accurate description of situations. And the other thing is that people need to understand is if it happens subconsciously,
Mm.
then it's you have nothing to do with it.
Mm.
It's just happened. It just happens subconsciously. What we now know is if you understand how the brain does it, we now can become more conscious of it and actually know, well, if this is how the brain produces negative and positive outcomes, I can actually change or influence negative and positive
Or,
outcomes
or maybe
by doing.
override. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have a playing role in this decision based on, I know if I know you monitor my face, hands, posture, gestures, and tone of voice,
Hmm.
then I can do things with my face, hands, posture, gestures, and tone of
Right.
voice to hopefully influence you to perceive me better.
Right.
And so I have a choice now.
Yeah.
Now, will it automatically make you perceive me better if I project more positive towards you? Not necessarily, but the chances are a hell of a lot better if I do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it really has to do with, I now understand what I'm looking at consciously. So when we
Yeah.
train people in what the brain does, they now go, oh, I get it. And if they go, I get it, for the first time, they are able to then say, then I play a role in this subconscious process by my conscious actions. And that's really what we want to get people to start to consider.
Yeah.
But we want them to consider it by understanding what the brain does. And I think too much of the concept of empathy and bias has gone to a conversation of intentional negative intentional outcomes.
Right.
So,
Can I take a stab at a real world
uh-huh,
example? Okay.
sure.
And what I'm very open, okay, very direct. And I have done a lot through the years facilitating. I I'm not big on buzzwords, but cultural competency, cultural, like all the
Mm-hmm.
different stuff that, but
Okay.
essentially what I believe to be, how do I connect and understand other people who think, sound, talk, live differently than myself? Okay.
Okay.
So one of the ways over the years is helping people to, again, become more aware of how you operate and just asking why. Okay, well, why do you think that about that neighborhood? Or why do you think that about that person? And a lot of times they just haven't asked themselves the question. So one of the biggest things that I see happening, and I'll give an example with you and me because we're sitting here, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm white Latina, you're black Latino. So
Okay.
say that we're in a training, you're presenting, I'm a teacher, and I say something, and you decide in that moment is significant enough for you to go, well, so what you did right there, that was actually a microaggression. I have the feelings and the things that happen, like you said about the energy earlier and emitting that. Okay.
Uh-huh.
What I see happen often with people, even when we're in work together and we've decided to do this work together, of identifying our own biases or maybe just things we didn't even realize we were saying or doing, is instead of having that discomfort, sitting in it to create a new neural pathway and get out of that comfort zone just enough to kind of override it from a negative to more of a different bend, right? Because bias is really a lean or a bend a certain way. In that moment, you're gonna feel me feeling like, he corrected me. Oh no, I said something wrong. Is it because I'm white and he's black? I think that that is what is happening. And then people can't get past it and they make it about the race thing. And it's really like what you said. Well, you just identify, just like if you identify you didn't know about a food. Why do you need to be embarrassed that you didn't know about something or that I caused you harm intentionally? Maybe I'm conflating different things from a neuroscience lens,
I
but I'm
understand. I
trying to
understand
give
what you're
a,
saying.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to make a point of a real world example. When you see somebody get very flustered, and I'm saying specifically in the States right now, and it has been this way for a number of years, even if you think you've gotten to that level of trust to be like, hey, well, this is why this could be taken this way from a person in poverty or whatever the thing is. I use the race example
I understand what
because,
you're saying.
yeah, help me,
However,
correct me.
I would never use the phrase microaggression,
Okay.
because if it's truly a microaggression, it wasn't an aggression.
Ah, okay.
It was just a micro response that's subconscious.
Mm,
If I Just by me calling it a microaggression, I've made it something it really isn't. And so the terminology is already not designed to do what we're supposed to be doing, which is if I'm supposed to help someone understand, mislabeling it will not help that. Um, okay, let's figure out how did this micro response occur.
Okay.
Let's say I, in the subconscious of my brain, have associated you to something negative.
Right.
So at 200 milliseconds, that subconscious connection of you to something negative occurred, which might influence my facial response.
Mm-hmm.
Am I aware of that? No. Was I intending to do that? No. Why did I do that? Because I've made some connection. It's not, it's so it happened. At the moment that I tell you this is what you've done, we've created a situation where we cannot even have a conversation because we're already at this. When in
It's already a
reality,
confrontation.
right. But if we understand how the brain produces those things and people go, ah, then you understand you could do it, or in situations you're most likely to do it. And then you might be more willing to think about, okay, I will try to project more control under certain situations because of the situation I'm in.
Right.
And so the reality is that everything that we're talking about when you talk about subconscious bias or implicit bias is completely unaware.
Yes.
It's understanding how it occurs that gives us an idea of why it could occur. And then we can say we can do things to prevent it. Because if you ask most people, would you want this to be the expression or the perception that someone has from your behavior?
Right.
They would tell you no.
Right.
So it's not like this is my value system. Those people are easy to get.
Yeah.
They want
Yeah.
to send that message,
Yeah.
but that isn't subconscious. That's conscious.
Right.
Subconscious says we're act likely to behave somewhat subconsciously different to differences. And differences isn't a thing. Differences is what's different to you. So some people may act different towards a female.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some people may act different towards someone who's overweight. Some people
Mm-hmm.
may act different towards people because different automatically alerts the brain. And, and,
Ah.
and difference that you're uncomfortable with usually does things to you that sends different signals. However, if I truly understand how the brain works and I'm aware that that could happen, then I could tell myself what are some of the differences that I may feel uncomfortable with. Then I will do a better job projecting
Mm-hmm.
or controlling face, hands, posture,
Yep.
gestures, and tone of voice in that moment. That is actually the process I went through. That's what I did. I said, once I learned the science, I said, then the logical thing is that I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I consciously tried to change my external projection of emotions to people I met. And I tried to do with everyone, but I'm more conscious to people who are different than me.
Right.
After a while, what happened was it was just the way I behaved.
Yep.
But the most important thing that happened to me was the world changed.
Yeah.
The world went from this place where people are iffy to the where most people are great.
Yeah.
And that was the experience I had. And the experience was nothing about me changed.
Mm.
I still in the same body.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I was thinking before was wrong. The reality was that we subconsciously project, and that influences what we
Yeah.
get back.
Yes. Do you do
So
yeah. Horacio, do you think that is one of the biggest things people can do, just pause when they start to feel something like that, like what you described, and go, why? Because I found the same as I continue to grow in my own life journey. the more that I just ask why and stop in my head, I pretend like there's a little version of me on my shoulder asking me.
Hmm.
and, I, and I'll walk away from a situation or whatever and think, oh, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, that type of thing. And then say, well, why though? What are the other ways that as people encounter things and they go, yeah, I, he's right, I'm just not understanding my responses, or I'm using man-made constructs like race or gender, etc., to say that this is really what's happening and validate my fears and my anger, blah, blah, blah. What would you say are there any other strategies that help in the moment you get that feeling of almost like a bubbling up panic, like, oh, well, this person looked at me weird, what's going on? And sometimes it's for a reason, right?
Hmm.
I believe in spiritual intuition. So like that's a whole other conversation outside of neuroscience, but um what would you say when people start to encounter that, why'd that man look at me that way type thing in their
Hmm.
head? Because it
I,
comes off of us. It comes off of us, even if we don't
I
say
understand
it.
that. I understand that. But I also think there's a difference between the person on the lookout and the person who's just reacting.
Ooh,
Um, if you're on the lookout, you see more, but also your circumstances can put you on the lookout. So let me give you an example.
okay.
We're aware that kids from poverty seem to monitor negative expressions far more than positive expressions. And they actually miss some of the positive expressions that their brain's supposed to be getting. And we think as an adaptation based on survival if they come out of very high risk neighborhoods. So it behooves them to subconsciously notice negative more. And because they subconsciously monitor negative more, they consciously then will see a higher percentage of negative responses.
Yep.
But the problem is they're actually missing the positive ones that should have been able to counteract some of the negative ones. So that's why some people will walk on a chip. When you, let's say that is how you're walking and interacting with the world on a daily basis, there's a higher than probability that you'll also see things that just wasn't there because you're constantly, this is who you're becoming your makeup on and this is who you're dealing with, and you think this skill has kept you alive and now it becomes a defensive mechanism. And so it goes back to the thing of really understanding how does the brain do these things and what circumstances get you there. So if I understand that I come from poverty, I will spot negative things more, which will also make me more sensitive to negative things. Plus I might see some negative things that aren't there, but I'm also missing positive things. Then one of the controlling things for me out of poverty is I now have to consciously look for the positive things because it will help me understand the world more accurately, but it will also enable my brain chemistry to change.
Hmm.
But if I don't understand the science of this is really going on with me and because of my circumstance, then I'm just left to my devices. And my devices is part of the picture. And that's the problem. That's what I'm saying that this whole process the brain produces to produce bias isn't only related to race, culture, social.
Right.
It's
Right.
related to okay, what kind of chair are you sitting on? Is
Mm-hmm.
the chair softer or harder? Well, this is how much negative bias impacts us. Our harder chair changes the way we attack people, how we interact with people. A
Ooh.
softer chair actually changes. Yes, because the brain says, I'm having a negative butt experience. So
So what you're
it's
saying is we should
a
all be in big
negotiation.
comfy chairs in the classroom. That's what it,
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
That's what I've
So
always
we have
thought.
right. And we have confirmation bias where we go,
Yeah.
okay, I know I am designed to see subconsciously things that support my belief. No intention needed. My brain will do it automatically. That
That's right.
microsaccade will
Right.
spot it. So what I believe is gets stronger. If I'm aware of that, then I know I might one of my jobs is to look for things that might contradict my belief because they're out there. But it
Yeah.
also makes me know that what I believe needs to be always tempered because the natural tendency of my brain is to overcompensate to make my belief more valid. As a result, I can have a strong belief that's really, really wrong.
And
And once you
harmful and
accept that,
harmful. Yeah.
then you're willing to look at
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
But if you don't even understand that, so your brain produces so many different kinds of biases that doesn't have to do anything with race or culture.
Yep.
All of those things come together to then influence that. So let's say I have a negative subconscious opinion about a group. Well, if I know negative bias is 5 times more impacting, understand how that will influence my subconscious brain. So I start to understand how we can get to reactions that are what they really are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think the good, and that's why I tell people the last book I wrote was to clarify many of the misunderstandings related to bias, because I think the science, when it's done correctly, does this to us,
Yeah.
brings us together. When it's done wrong, it does this.
Yes.
And I've seen too many cases where the science was used to do this.
Yep.
And what was missing from the science is the rest of the science.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not the whole picture, right? And I think that's how we shortchange each other as humans. We don't have
Yeah.
the whole picture. And that's why I
Mhm.
say, well, get compassionately curious then. If you're interested, then you ask the whole picture. And if they feel comfortable and safe with you, they'll tell more pieces of that picture over time. If you're genuine, if you want it. I think the thing is, we also have to be honest with ourselves. Okay, well, do you have the bandwidth and energy to pour in to those situations, whether it's with a work colleague you want to get to know better or whatever, right? So from your purview, how is kind of this empathy crisis or our understanding of how we even interact in our responding and reacting, how is this impairing us in society and culture right now, like the most, especially in your
Uh,
work with, yeah, yeah.
we're more impacted than ever before. And that's not me being, oh my God.
Okay.
It's me saying, if you look at all the different forms of research, like, okay, most of the literature says empathy's been dropping now basically 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Some literature says it's it bottomed out and it's gone up a little. But either way, it's still really low where it bottomed out and it's gone up. So we're 3/4 of our society right now is less empathetic than people who lived in 1970.
Ooh,
That's scary. Well, there are lots of reasons for the drop in empathy, but there is a reason to sound the alarm, because empathy is the thing that makes us human. And I can say that clearly, and no one can argue with it, because when we check the people who tend to lack empathy, let's go to the extremes: psychopaths,
hmm.
sociopaths.
That's right.
What do they have in common? They have in common self above everything else.
Hmm.
Their opinion is stronger than everyone else. And their opinion tends to be loud and aggressive, because when you lack empathy, there's really no need to consider another point of view,
Hmm.
anybody's feelings,
Hmm.
nothing else. So here's how it's impacting us today. We're having we have less empathetic people, and we're having, because empathy allows me to negotiate with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I'm presenting. I'm at the Innovative School Summit Conference where you saw me. There's
Hmm.
2,000 people there.
Hmm.
You are well aware that I do a lot of, I'm not, I don't take myself seriously. So people
Hmm.
laugh. A lot of, okay.
Hmm.
I said a tongue in cheek comment. 1,999 people laughed. One dude got offended. Oh my God, I can't believe he said that. He took it literal. He got upset. He's writing his evaluations. He's yelling and screaming. And because he's that emotional and because he's that negative, it's going to trigger his amygdala. So he's not done with just writing. He's going to go out there and what? Talk to everybody, say to everything, yell and scream. And right now we have a world in which people are reacting to that and
Yeah.
saying, oh no, we got to stop. We got to stop. So we have lots of people stopping to give the least the least empathetic person
The
the
most
greatest
validation.
voice.
Yeah.
And so at the moment when we gave him all that voice, we have discounted
Hmm.
1,999 people who understood what went on because they had empathy. So empathy is impacting us in a lot of different ways. And one of the things we're seeing now is when you have less empathetic kids, you're going to have more what? Not only conflict, but less ability to find the truth, because truth has something to do with empathy. Because I'm empathetic and you and me have very different opinions. My empathy allows me to go, let me evaluate this rather than react to it. So one of the things that I'm really concerned about right now is that I'm hearing people say, whose truth? There's these people on this side's truth, and there's these people on this side's truth.
Hmm.
And they have gotten themselves to saying there really isn't a truth. Everybody just believes what they want to believe. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the moment you get to that place, you're
Mm-hmm.
saying there isn't truth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is truth. And so how does this impact us today? Well, I'm a member of the movement that says, hey, the True Health Initiative wants to say that if so many things that happen to us, disease and illness, can be altered by having a better understanding of the impact of lifestyle,
Yep.
what you eat,
Yep.
how you move, how you sleep. And this is medical. Right now, we are fighting what we know is good science
Mm-hmm.
because people are able to say, whose science? And we have people discounting valid science because they go, it's just your truth, not. And the impact of this is going to be people's health
Yeah.
because I've had two experiences recently that I've been personally involved in
Mm-hmm.
that a person was ill on their deathbed and refused the treatment because they said they didn't believe the
Right.
science.
Yep. Yep.
That's real life implications here. There are people who are now saying, I don't have to eat this way and I don't have to exercise because I've now found new voices that says it's not valid. I prefer that science. Well, okay, I prefer that science too if I wanted to eat bongbongs and not get up and do my workout.
Well, yeah. I well,
Exactly.
well, one thing I want to add in really quick too is I started monitoring, this was years ago, because I tell people I'm a recovering workaholic. I put when I went into school administration in Chicago public schools, easily put in 14, 15-hour days. So I'm a recovering workaholic in my soft suburban dog mom era. but but for real, music, I love how you started actually. So you said something at the beginning, and I want to repeat it because I want to make sure people caught it. But you were specific about the types of music that you come out to, and you're the first guest I've had who answered that in that way about, well, I would choose something that people recognize the beat right away, like Billie Jean, but because of what it does to the brain. I myself am a person who has studied energetics for years, and I create custom playlists for my entire
Mhm.
presentations. That's why else right away when I saw you, I said, "Oh, I rock with this guy," because I knew what
I
you
play
were
so many
doing.
much. I play so much music in the background. Yeah, I do.
So I know I write, and even from my own belief standpoint, David played a song and it pleased the Lord. Like music
Right,
is very powerful, sound waves and frequencies, even from a scientific perspective. One of the
right.
tidbits, honestly, when I've gone through some of my darkest periods of awakening or coming out of grief and different things that have happened, as is all of our human experience on different degrees of suffering, is music. And you mentioned food and movement and health. Part of what we consume and food is what we listen to, sound waves constantly, what beats
Right.
into our brain, what we're binging on Netflix or whatever. Oh, and finally, where you're scrolling and what content you are choosing to engage in with all the, if those are your things. And I'm not even going to say if, because for most of us, even though we didn't grow up with this, we've seen it. We have seen from typewriters to TikTok. So, what would you say, or is there any other tips as we close out that you would give For me, it is I am very, there are times when I would play specific frequencies of music to reprogram
Mhm.
things I was struggling with.
You know, and the thing you mentioned grief
Yeah.
and the whole thing, and I've had to deal with grief recently,
Okay.
and one of the and I also have a couple friends that are dealing with grief currently,
Hmm.
and I'm going to tell you what I told them. You know that question you asked, why? And that's the question I asked them because I said, if you understand this, you're living in one of the few cultures in the world that doesn't tell you how to grieve.
Mm.
And so you're left on your own responses and you're watching what people do on movies and television and things to try to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do. But there are also cultures in which they go, okay, you mourn these many days, and then you get up, put on a different kind of
Yep.
clothes, you
Yep.
start celebrating your life. And for people who grow up with thinking about that's grief, they're able to prescribe themselves a different mechanism to be able to go on and move.
Yeah.
If you think about the brain actually told us you're supposed to grieve a certain amount of time and then get over it. And getting over it doesn't mean forget. Get over means get back to balance, get back to thing.
Yeah.
And we know this because if we study the brain after grief, and we're talking significant grief,
Yes.
we see most people's brains return to a level of homeostasis in about 30 days. So those primitive ancient people, when they designed a 30-day grieving people and then started partying,
Yep.
actually had a good insight.
Yeah.
But all the point is that it told you that when we go through things, there's a point where we just have to change our perspective. And I think if we think about leaving anyone with, it actually tells us that the brain was designed to restore us by our magical ability to change our perspective. And to me, that's a beautiful
Mm.
thing. That
Mm.
is a beautiful thing. That means
Yeah.
I don't care your circumstance, I don't care what you've gone through. You were given a power through your brain to actually change your perspective. Now, when we looked at that power and we actually analyzed it, we found out it produced happiness. The same things that we say, oh, I'm happy. When we looked at it, we found out there have been big studies on happiness lately. And one of the things that the big studies concluded was very little of happiness has anything to do with what's external.
Yeah. That's right.
And everybody thinks it is, oh, this happened to me, I was happy. They've said, well, when we really looked at happiness, the level of contentment, it really had more to do with how we viewed things than what it was. And I think that is the message that everyone needs to leave with. It's not me telling you this is a good idea. It's me telling you you were designed for this. You
Mm.
were built for this. Your brain was actually supposed to do this. And regardless of how you want to say it, what label someone wants to put it in, whether you want to call it synthetic happiness, whether you want to call it, everything we know about you is that the trauma should not overwhelm you. Your circumstances should not dictate what happens to you.
Mm.
You have in every situation, in every circumstance, the ability to get out of it and be a better person and be a stronger person. And that's what we want everyone to be.
Mm. Well, I'm kind of sad to hit end on the call, but this has
Already?
been yeah, it's been an hour already. I'm gonna flash your bio slide up here, especially. I will always link people back to your website. Horacio travels. Do you travel the world or are you mainly in the United States? As
I
far as
am mainly in the United States, especially since COVID.
you,
And
well,
that
yeah,
changed,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it changed
Yep,
some of the levels,
yep.
but I'll travel any place.
Okay, so this is a little bit more about him again. I always link the full guest for our featured voices episodes, you all. They're always below in the caption description, and I always put some assets in the guest's website so that you can easily access any of these tools that Dr. Sanchez has been kind enough to even just sit in space and share with us today from the heart and also really from the brain, and how they work together. So thank you, sir, not only for your contributions and what I know you're going to continue to do, and hopefully our paths continue to cross. But I am so grateful you took time out of your day to be on Love Learning You. Let's continue to
And
get compassionately curious together. Any final words?
thank you for being allowing me to be the first stranger.
No longer. Now,
No
hey,
longer.
now if we meet up sometime in a conference or whatever, we'll have to have,
We're
some
like
rice.
that.
Yeah, some rice and beans or something.
Sounds great.
Thank you, man.
See
I
you
really
soon.
appreciate it. Bye bye.
It's been a
Take care.
pleasure. Bye
Bless.
bye.